Hi everyone, thanks for joining in. I'm excited to have Nina D. Campbell joining me today. Hello, Nina.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thanks. Just a bit about Nina. So, Nina studied theatre and literature at university before stumbling into the world of work in the midst of the recession that we had to have. She cobbled together a respectable career as a professional writer, working across the community and public sectors, before a midlife health challenge changed her priorities. Nina now writes fiction full time with a focus on stories about strong women. Together with her partner and their spirited Jack Russell Terrier, she lives in South Australia, close to the world class wine regions, sparkling beaches, and other tempting delights. So thanks, Nina. And Nina's latest book is Daughters of Eve. Hopefully you can see my copy there, and we can see your one there in the background. And just want to say as well that thanks to Alan and Unwin, if anyone asks a question during the Facebook Live, you'll have a chance to win a copy of Daughters of Eve. So thanks for joining us, Nina. I want to say as well, I really, really loved Daughters of Eve. It was a great, gripping novel. Wanted me to keep reading to find out what was going to happen. So thanks for that.
Thank you. Oh, that's always lovely to hear, especially somebody who's as well read as you are.
Thank you. And just wondering if you want to start off by telling people a bit about Daughters of Eve.
Sure. It's a fast-paced police procedural, and yes, I have to practice saying that quite regularly, that's based around Amelia Hart. She's a tough, no-nonsense, mid-40s detective who's been working in the homicide squad for a while, but her career has been mostly sidelined by a fairly blokey culture. She actually stumbles upon a murder, as in it drops literally at her feet, and hopes to move her career in a more advantageous direction, getting a bit of a high-profile murder under her belt. But things don't quite work out the way she wants to. And yeah, that's just the first murder in quite a string of them. The body count gets quite high. They're all male, and eventually we find out that the Daughters of Eve are behind it.
And can you share with us what was the first idea you had behind Daughters of Eve?
Sure. Actually, the first time I thought about it was way back in the 1990s when I was a women's officer at uni. And I remember I got a lot of women coming into my office and talking to me about the sexual assaults and sexual harassment that they were experiencing on campus. So it was a bit of an eye-opening experience when I was quite young. And I remember just thinking, I wonder what would happen if there was like a vigilante bunch of women that went around and just took these guys out of the equation. Because I was young and, full of all that sort of spirit and spunk. And I don't think it's an idea I ever really wanted to see happen, but it just felt good, I think, when I was feeling disempowered. And the idea came back to me again in 2017, which is actually when I wrote the first draft of the book, when the Me Too movement was happening. And again, I had that experience of a lot of my friends online disclosing their personal experiences, and yeah, that feeling of helplessness that we get, that sort of shared vicarious trauma of hearing about what happens to our friends and remembering things that happen to us in our lives. I just went, oh, wow, that idea just came back, and I went, yep, I think I might just give it a crack and try writing it.
And will we see Amelia again?
That's the plan. At the moment, I've sketched out three chapters, so I'm a bit of a pantser, so I won't really know how it ends. But at the moment, yeah, Amelia's back and in my head and chatting, so I anticipate that there should be a second novel. There's a lot, I think, in the rewrite to Daughters of Eve. I put in a whole new storyline, and I really want to resolve that. So that's the storyline around Grace. I really want to unpack some of that stuff around child trafficking and dig into that a little bit more.
Yeah, well, that's great to hear that we will see her again.
Yeah, she's pretty spunky, isn't she? I quite like having her in my head. She actually turned up one day. I sort of sat down to start writing, and I thought, I need to write something completely new. And that idea came up, and this voice just popped into my head, fully formed, raw, rude, and to the point.
Yeah, no, that's great. And could you tell us, had writing been, like growing up and that, had writing been something that you always loved or thought you would have as a career?
Well, it's interesting. I'm actually dyslexic, so it wasn't something that I thought would be a career naturally. It wasn't a great fit in that sense. But my mum actually wanted to be a writer.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I think I grew up sitting on her lap learning to read. So I wasn't actually diagnosed with dyslexia until quite late, because I learned to read from sitting on her lap, watching her read. She would read adult novels with her finger tracing under the words.
Oh,
So, yeah, I grew up on Asimov and Philip K. Dick and Heinlein, and yeah, so it was books and stories were always my absolute favourite thing. But that's why I drifted into theatre, I think, because I was more able to explore story until I was diagnosed with dyslexia, and then I got these glasses which actually correct it to a great degree.
Oh, really?
So until then, I was I was kind of stuck in that. I lived my stories on the stage.
No, that's an interesting story, yeah. And we've got a few people watching, which is great. So just want to say to the people watching that thanks to Alan and Unwin, if you ask a question during the Facebook Live, you'll have a chance to win a copy of Daughters of Eve. Kelly says it's an interesting title and she wonders if you chose it.
Yes, I did actually, and it came to me early. It's really strange. Before I really understood that it was about the sort of vigilante gang, I just had this sense of calling it the Daughters of Eve. And it wasn't until a year or two later, when I was watching one of those Narnia movies, that I remembered where that term came from, the Daughters of Eve and the Sons of Adam. Yeah, and it just sort of felt like a unifying feminine strength.
Yeah, it's a great title.
Thank you.
And Sharon says, did you do much research for the book?
I sort of did, but not the research that you'd think I probably did. I did a lot of Googling because it was COVID, couldn't travel. So Sydney, I have memories of Sydney in the 80s. I don't have memories really so much of Sydney more modern or any of the suburbs. So I did a lot of Google Street View and I did a lot of work looking into the police force, its structure and how it worked. But I'm more of an intuitive writer, so I basically wrote most of it from my imagination. I'm still really hoping that I'll hear from a police officer at some point and he or she will tell me whether or not I have actually nailed it or just made something completely fictitious. But because of the subject matter, a lot of what I wrote comes from the stories that women have shared with me. So, and the experiences that they've had. So it's kind of like a lifetime of research in that sense. And also, I think there was, I made a decision quite early on to fictionalise some aspects of it. So, for example, the particular bridge that the Seacliff Bridge killer dies on or kills his children on, it is a bridge that's almost impossible to dive off of intentionally. So I tried to, in a sense, protect people who might have any kind of personal stories attached to those kinds of crimes as much as I could.
And yeah, Belinda asked about where your book's set, but you mentioned before it's set in Sydney. I'm interested to know then, like when I was reading it, I thought that you must have known Sydney well, and you said that you weren't able to visit because of COVID and that. Why did you choose Sydney instead of maybe a city that you might have been more familiar with?
I wanted to choose a city where that was large enough and where I thought that kind of critical mass of anger could spill out onto the streets. So after the Daughters of Eve published their manifesto and come out, there is quite a lot of coverage of how we respond as a society and how the government responds to that notion of women killing men. And I wanted a city that was big enough that it would get that kind of spark happening where people would rebel and respond and hit the streets. And I think the fact that Sydney was one of the first cities to start in Australia to start having those marches for freedom and things like that kind of
Yeah.
indicates that it is a more volatile, and because it's got a bigger population, I think. And yeah, so it was a toss up between Sydney and Melbourne, but I didn't know Melbourne very well either. So it was, and I had about 3 months of living there in the 80s, where I learned a little bit about, I knew, you know, certain suburbs like Marrickville, and I knew some of the North Shore. So I had a little bit of an understanding of where the different socioeconomic groups lived. And I had friends who I was able to call on and say, where would a really rich barrister live?
And Emma says she loved your book, and so did her criminologist daughter.
That's pretty exciting. Thank you, Emma, and thank you to your daughter.
And I'm wondering if you could tell us a bit about how you first got published. Was it a long journey or something that happened quite quick for you?
It was actually a very long journey. So I first started seriously writing back in 2010. That's when I wrote my first novel. And I don't know that that was a brilliant novel. I think that was, it was definitely an exploration of the notion of craft, I think. After that, I wrote a couple more, and I was I was quite serious and systematic about the kind of courses that I did to try and get that craft really integrated into myself, because I'm not much of a systematic person. I'm a quite chaotic person. So I just sort of would do these courses and tuck it away in the back of my brain, so that in the end, the back of my brain would spit out stories that were a bit better. And yeah, so I was using the Romance Writers of Australia conferences as an opportunity to pitch, and getting better and better responses to the work that I was doing. It was around about 2017 when I wrote Daughters of Eve that I really felt like I had a novel that was fully ready to be published. And I was very lucky to, over time, I found my agent, Anjanette, who's absolutely fabulous. And yeah, we sort of moved towards that process of getting it into shape, getting it into a publishable shape, and getting it into the Allen and Unwin, who accepted it. So it took quite a long time. But I actually think, the more I think about it, the more I think that that time was kind of necessary. I look at how I was when I was first writing. I think you have to become kind of battle worn, because it is such a long marathon. And even now, when you publish, there's still a lot of promotion to do, and a lot of things that you have to learn, and a lot of, you know, people respond positively, people respond negatively. You've got to be able to weather that storm. So yeah, I think it's actually a good thing for me that it took that long to get to the point where I was out in the world.
And what about what you like to read yourself? Is there a certain genre you like to read, and also maybe if there's anything you might have read lately you want to recommend to us?
Oh gosh, yeah, I like to read very broadly. I read a lot of crime for obvious reasons, but I also read a lot of commercial women's fiction novels. In the crime world, I've just finished a new novel by Mercedes Mercier, called White Noise. She's another South Australian author, and that was an absolute cracker. I can highly recommend that. It's a real gripping, edge of the seat thriller. And The Good Mother by Ray Cairns, that's also in the same sort of format. Yeah. It's a running pace kind of story. So you definitely don't lose any attention in that. The pages turn themselves. There's The Woman in the Library by Solari Gentle. I just finished reading that as well. Absolutely brilliant. A slower pace, but absolutely keeps you working your way through it. The whodunit and the layers of a story within a story within a story. It is absolutely a tour de force of crime writing. So I think they'd probably, and Ruth Morgan, if you get a chance to look it up online, The Whitworth Mysteries.
Okay.
She's written a set of short stories based around the Murray River region, and just beautiful, really beautiful stories. Then, The Family String by Denise Picton. I just picked that up the other day and started it. I'm absolutely loving it. That's an absolute corker. Really, a really gentle, heartfelt piece. And is there anything else? No, I think that's probably it. Yep.
Yeah, no, that's some great recommendations. Some I've read myself and loved.
Yep, there's
Yeah.
definitely, I do love, but I do read quite broadly. There's also,
Mm,
I'll read everything. There's a rom-com that's coming out in hopefully the beginning of next year that is written by Emma Gray, and I've read a couple of her young adult fiction novels, which are
mm,
just fabulous. And I've read an early version of her book, and I think it's going to be called Love Something. It's basically a grief rom-com which will basically, rip your heart out,
yeah.
have you crying
Mm,
and laughing in equal measure, but right from the bottom of your heart. It's going to be an absolutely brilliant read. So
yeah.
keep an eye out for that one.
No, thanks for sharing that. Belinda wonders if you had a favourite character to write.
Ooh, I did really, I think Amelia would have to be my absolute favourite because it's kind of, it's a bit quirky, but I realised after I'd published the novel that a lot of Amelia actually comes from my mum, who passed away
Okay.
when I was 30.
Mm,
And having that particularly wry voice in my head reminds me a lot of her and her strength as well. So I did absolutely adore writing her. But I think I really found a lot of joy in writing Willoughby because he was just so vile. He was channeling a lot of the men that I've actually worked for in my life, who were a bit up themselves and and didn't really realise how they used power inappropriately.
yeah.
So that was a
Yeah.
bit of fun as well. I really enjoyed him and Peterson just kind of making them the characters that you would dislike the most.
Yeah. And Kim says your cover's really eye-catching, which yeah, do you want to put it a bit closer for people to see? I love how the woman is standing like right there in the middle of the V. That does
It
look
is really
great.
good, isn't it? I had
Yeah.
a friend who's a graphic designer tell me that V coming down to that character is what draws your eye right down, and I was like,
Yeah.
oh, that's quite clever, isn't it?
Mm.
But I really love that, and I love the colours and the stormy sky. I think it's got a lot of depths and layers to it.
Yeah, no, it's a great cover. Kelly wonders if there's an issue that you think you would like to address in future books.
Wow, yeah. Now that's tricky, isn't it? There are lots. There are
Mm,
lots. I think Daughters of Eve still has some layers to strip back on the issue of women's disempowerment and women's and the whole sort of question of sexual and domestic violence. But I think I'd love to look a little bit more at the environmental aspects, the way that big business and power and money all seems to sort of swirl around, throwing us further towards the brink of extinction when we really need to start thinking differently about the way that we live with our planet.
And Kim wonders how you balance your reading and writing time.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's hard because reading is my favourite kind of distraction, and if I'm in a place with my writing where it's not really flowing too well, I'll often disappear into a book, and that can be helpful sometimes, but sometimes it is just avoiding the issue, and I need to actually sit down and get tough with myself. I always read every day, even if it's just an hour or so before I go to bed, to kind of detox from the whole electronic media world. But I usually do also try and do a couple of hours during the day as well. And I break it up. I use it to break up because the injury that I had that caused me to give up my working work was to do with typing and my shoulders.
Yeah.
So I have to not write for too long. I have to get up and walk around and move. And so I'll sometimes put on an audiobook and go for a bit of a walk.
So do you have a favourite place to do your writing?
I have a workspace that I work in, which is really lovely. It's a shared study which I share with my partner and my puppy dog, Molly, who sits at my feet. I think that's kind of my happy place at the moment. It's a nice, cozy kind of, we've moved into a smaller kind of cozy house, and so it's got a nice feel to it. But
Nice.
I think my favourite place ever to write was when I wrote my first novel. We had a Gothic cottage in Burren Bateman that was built by a man who was wonderfully mad. He had sourced all of the stuff from various different secondhand places, and there was like a beam of wood through the middle of it that actually came out of Old Parliament House when they refurbished it. Just
really?
Incredible. And it had these old French windows that were 150 years old with tin-poured glass that looked out over this field, and just beautiful field full of horses and things like that. And I used to sit up under that and write, and that would probably be my favourite place. I just don't get to write there anymore.
Yeah. No, sounds great. I'm wondering, with Daughters of Eve, there are some very sensitive topics that it touches on. How has that, like, have you had readers contact you who this has brought things up for them, or they've said they might have had similar experiences, and how have you handled that?
Yeah, it is tricky. I've kind of had that all my life in some degree. I think from the time when I was a women's officer through till now, I've always been, I think it's one of the things that writers have in common is that we're usually fairly empathic and we're very good listeners, even though we're often also quite good talkers. But yeah, I tend to ask the inappropriate questions that people don't expect. So I often, I guess, hear the stories that people have told. Most of the feedback that I've had from the book has been from women who have said it was really an empowering read, that they found that the topic was handled sensitively, and that it worked for them, that it actually made them feel better, made them feel heard, seen, and connected with. But I have had a couple of readers who've said that it was hard in places to read. Nobody has said yet that they aren't really glad that they read it.
Yeah.
And that they didn't think it was worth that journey. But for the most part, I tried to really step back from a lot of the depths of the darkness. There's only really a couple of places where, and you'll always hear things through doors or through very short descriptions. So I very much tried, I wasn't interested in making anything that would re-traumatise anyone. I was very much trying to make something that would help give us a voice for our anger, let that out, and let us feel, let women feel connected with that kind of empowering, righteous anger, and find a way to live with it.
And I think reading it myself, I think you did a great job with that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Jackie.
And what do you hope readers will love about Daughters of Eve?
I hope they love the heart of it. I hope they love it as a story about love, even though it is a story a lot about anger and righteous anger. I think it's also a lot about the love that we have for our family and for our fellow human beings. I also hope that they connect with the fact that no one's actually perfect in it. I think in these days of cancel culture where we want, we sort of scream at everyone unless they're perfect. I don't think we are perfect as human beings, and I think everybody in that story has their frailties and their failings, and I think coming to terms with our own human frailty and failings, I think, is important, and just learning to say sorry when you do something wrong and trying to make amends is probably one of the things I hope people get out of it, that we don't have to be perfect to be perfectly imperfect.
And Adrian wonders what draws you to writing crime.
It's interesting because mostly before that I wrote commercial women's fiction predominantly, and for me it's about strong women. So what drew me to crime, I think, was the desire to really unpack the crimes of domestic and sexual violence and our social kind of relationship with them. But what I find when I get in there is I really enjoy the fact that it does go to some fairly extreme and dark places and allows you to look things in the eye that we normally look away from. And it also brings out the strength in the characters. I think when you're sort of dealing with those kinds of issues, the way that the police and first responders generally do, there's a lot of vicarious trauma in those worlds, and I think that trauma and healing that trauma is something that I'm really interested in.
Yeah. And Anita said the issues you raised were so authentic, it meant we could safely feel the repercussions all while feeling supported.
So thank you, Anita. That's a lovely thing to say, because that was definitely what I was hoping to do, make it a safe space for women to, particularly women, but also for men if they want to dive into it. And a lot of men have contacted me and said that they've enjoyed it too, that opportunity to walk in a shadowy space but feel safe and understand it differently.
And what have you found so far to be the most difficult part of your writing process?
Editing.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty common, isn't it? I think editing's the hardest thing. One of my friends has just gone through that process with her book, and when you write the way that I write, I live inside the story, so I sort of move around inside of it, and finding a way to step out of it far enough to structurally alter it and move things around without losing that very intimate connectivity that you need to be able to write from the heart and to be able to write something that is deep and true, I still struggle with. And I think, I suspect when I have to do it again, I'll have the same problem. I have no problem with first drafts. I love them and I play around in that space quite a lot. But yeah, the discipline to go back and pull it apart, I was really, really lucky to have the editor that I had. She was so lovely and so sensitive, and I was able to understand all of the differences that she wanted me to make, to all the tinkering that she wanted me to do.
Yeah, no, that's great. And when you're writing, do you share with anyone as you write?
I usually do, yes. This particular novel, I had, because I'd never written crime before, I had my old boss, she was a absolutely avid reader of crime, and I would send her chapter at a time as it went across, and I often do that with some of my commercial women's fiction. I had friends who would read as I wrote, which is really very, very good of them, because you know, it's very frustrating to get to the end of a chapter and go, where's the next one coming? But it was great. For me, it's great because it gives me both that impetus to keep writing, because I've got that person asking, but it also gives me that instantaneous feedback that I haven't just written something that's really terrible.
Yeah.
And going into a new genre, I really needed to be sure that I hadn't jumped any particular sharks.
And changing genre, well, Kim's got a question about how your writing style's changed over times.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. My first novel, I remember it was read, interestingly, by a sub-editor for that who had just left and joined the public service, but had come from the company that ended up publishing me. I'd never really made that connection before. But I remember her saying to me, oh my God, if your characters have one more cup of tea, I'm going to kill myself. Stop it. Stop, stop going through the minutiae of their days. Cut hours out. So I was very much, because I sort of wandered through the whole story myself, I was trying to fill everything in, and I didn't have that kind of ability to, on the balance of show and tell, we sort of tell to jump time and do things like that, and I hadn't got that together. And also my descriptions have become much more refined, so I'll often only have a couple of words to try and put you in a place, in a sense of place, and that's actually because I've recently found out that I don't actually make pictures in my head the way a lot of people do. So that's fascinating. So I actually, I have to work quite hard to write description, and so I used to work too hard at it.
Okay. Mm. And have you found, as you've written more novels and had more novels published, has firstly, has the process become faster for you? And secondly, has it become easier for you?
Well, this is only the first novel that's been published, so the other novels
But
weren't
the
published.
others that you.
Yeah, but definitely I think it is something that I have become faster at. And also I've had to do less editing with
Okay, yeah.
some of the, well, certainly with Daughters of Eve, there was quite a lot of editing really, but it's less of that kind of minutiae. It's more like the sentences actually craft themselves a little bit easier than they used to.
Mm. Well, thanks so much for talking with me. It's been great chatting to you.
Thank you.
Do you want to share with people how they can follow you?
Sure. I'm on, at the moment, I think almost all the platforms. I'm on Facebook, Twitter. So I'm on Facebook as Nina D. Campbell. I'm on Twitter as Nina D. Campbell, or Nina N.D. Campbell, I think, writes. And I'm on Instagram as well. So if people go to my website, which is ninadcampbell.com.au, they can actually find links to all my socials. It'd be great.
Yeah, no, thank
Come
you.
along.
Thanks so much. And like I said, I loved reading Daughters of Eve and look forward to reading more.
Fantastic. I'm writing it now, and hopefully it'll get published. If we sell enough copies, that's the secret.
Yep. No, good luck with that. And thanks to everyone who joined in. We had some great questions. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.